As the sun rose over the neatly lined streets of Maple Grove, John Richardson took a moment to appreciate the life he had built. Nestled in a quiet neighborhood, his charming three-bedroom home was more than just a roof over his head. It represented years of hard work and dedication. Moving into the house a decade ago, John felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. It was here where he had created countless memories with his family, from birthday parties in the backyard to cozy winters spent by the fire. John always prided himself on being an exemplary neighbor, abiding by community guidelines and participating in HOA meetings whenever possible. He valued the sense of camaraderie among residents who shared the same vision of maintaining their neighborhood's aesthetic charm. His house, painted a soft shade of blue with white trim, stood as a symbol of unity and pride. He invested time and effort into landscaping, believing that when one person takes care of their property, it uplifts everyone's sense of ownership. However, this tranquility was soon shattered when John's neighbors relayed an alarming message. The HOA intended to put a "for sale" sign on his beloved home. The reasoning? Alleged violations related to property upkeep, issues John felt were exaggerated at best. Confused and furious, he couldn't comprehend why they would take such drastic measures against someone who had always upheld their standards. In that heated moment of disbelief, something inside him ignited, a spark of defiance against what he perceived as an unjust attack on his livelihood. The tranquility that once enveloped John Richardson's life quickly unraveled when he learned of the HOA's unexpected plans. It began with a routine notice delivered to his mailbox, highlighting concerns raised by an anonymous neighbor. At first, John dismissed it as petty complaints. Faded paint on the garage door and a couple of weeds in his front garden were cited as violations. To him, such issues seemed trivial, especially in a neighborhood where children played freely and dogs roamed without leashes. Yet, the HOA didn't view it that way. They had previously implemented strict guidelines dictating everything from lawn height to the color palette of homes. Though John consistently maintained his property to meet those standards, these infractions were perceived as a serious breach. The governing board convened behind closed doors, fueled by whispers from fellow homeowners who questioned John's commitment to community aesthetics after they claimed to have spotted him occasionally neglecting minor maintenance. Feeling cornered, John soon received hand-delivered notification from the HOA stating their decision to place a "for sale" sign in front of his house unless he complied with their demands within a week's time. Alarmed at the draconian nature of this action, he struggled to grapple with the implications. A once proud member of the community, suddenly treated like a pariah. Their choice felt less about maintaining standards and more about wielding power over residents. This realization left John not just offended but motivated. In that moment, he recognized that this wouldn't just be about his home. It became a broader battle against what he viewed as an overreaching authority in his own community. As the reality of the HOA's decision sank in, a tumult of emotions swirled within John Richardson. Confusion washed over him like a cold wave. How could it have come to this? The sign, stark and intrusive, mocked not just his home but the memories embedded within its walls. He recalled countless weekends spent painting the living room with his late wife, the laughter of their children echoing in the air, and summer barbecues that turned into impromptu dance parties under twinkling string lights. This house was a treasure trove of family history, and now it was being threatened by bureaucratic overreach. Anger began to simmer as he paced around the house, his thoughts spiraling. How could they label him a bad neighbor when he prided himself on keeping his property well maintained? He remembered the time he helped an elderly neighbor fix her fence, believing that looking out for each other was the essence of community. Now, it felt like that spirit had been disregarded completely. The sense of injustice settled heavily on his shoulders. John had always been active in neighborhood events, organizing picnics and volunteering for cleanup days. Yet here he stood, isolated by faceless accusations. The more he thought about it, the more absurd it became. He imagined how neighbors who once greeted him warmly were now quick to believe a few exaggerated complaints. In that moment, John felt a wave of determination coursing through him. It wasn't just about defending his home. It was about standing up for what was right and reclaiming his place in a community he loved. As the anger within John simmered, a bold idea began to take shape in his mind. The more he pondered the HOA's actions, the more absurd it seemed that they would resort to such extreme measures over minor maintenance issues. It wasn't just about him. It felt like an attack on all homeowners who valued their properties and their community. The notion of vulnerability ignited a fire in John, a realization that he could no longer stand idly by. After a restless night filled with contemplation, he knew he had reached a tipping point. He envisioned himself confronting the HOA directly, but the image of their smug faces only fueled his resentment further. Instead, he decided to hit them where it would sting most: their authority. The idea of putting up a "for sale" sign at the HOA office emerged as a defiant statement that he was not afraid to fight back. This act would not merely be an impulsive reaction. It was a carefully considered decision to challenge what he saw as an overreaching governing body that wielded power without accountability. He recalled how many times they had enforced rules selectively and imposed fines without hesitation, often ignoring the very spirit of community they claimed to uphold. To him, this was a symbolic act of rebellion, a way to unmask the hypocrisy and draw attention to their inconsistency. John imagined the reactions of his neighbors as he drove past the HOA office later that day, imagining them nodding in agreement, perhaps even joining him in solidarity. This was more than just about defending his home. It was about standing up for fellow homeowners who might also feel oppressed by the bureaucratic hand that governed their lives. As determination crystallized within him, John felt certain that he could spark a movement, one that prioritized genuine community over arbitrary regulations. With determination coursing through his veins, John set out to execute his audacious plan. The first step was to design the sign that would not only be eye-catching but also deliver a clear message. Armed with a piece of plywood, a can of bright red paint, and bold white letters, he began crafting words that would challenge the authority of the HOA. For sale, classic community hypocrisy. Each stroke of the brush felt liberating as he poured his frustration into this project. Realizing he needed a little muscle to help with execution, John reached out to a few trusted neighbors who were sympathetic to his cause. When he explained his plan, he was met with nods of agreement and even laughter at the irony of the situation. His neighbor Marcy immediately volunteered her truck for transport, while Mike offered to assist in erecting the sign at the HOA office. On the day of execution, adrenaline raced through John's body as they loaded up the sign and drove toward the HOA headquarters. As they approached, John felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. What if someone tried to stop them? What if the HOA retaliated? But as Marcy reassured him with her enthusiastic smile, he felt bolstered by their support. Upon arrival, they discovered that no one was present at the office. Seizing the moment, John and his friends quickly positioned the sign prominently in front of the entrance before snapping photos for posterity's sake. They stood back admiring their handiwork, a defiant statement set against an unyielding authority marked by moments of tension and victory. For John and his neighbors alike, it wasn't just about making a point. It was about reclaiming their voices within a community that had silenced them for too long. The impact of John's bold act rippled through the community in unexpected ways. Within hours of placing the sign, neighbors flocked to the HOA office, drawn by curiosity and a sense of solidarity. Social media buzzed with reactions. Pictures of John's sign flooded local groups, generating a mix of support and concern. Some residents cheered his courage, while others debated the appropriateness of his method, igniting discussions about the HOA policies that govern their lives. In coffee shops and parks, conversations shifted from casual pleasantries to the implications of living under strict HOA rules. Many voiced their frustrations about obscure regulations that seemed to prioritize aesthetic conformity over community spirit. John's actions had awakened a dormant energy among residents who felt similarly constrained by the HOA's arbitrary mandates but feared potential reprisal for speaking out. Support steadily grew as homeowners began sharing their own experiences with the HOA, recalling instances where they felt unfairly targeted or unjustly fined for minor infractions. A neighbor named Sarah revealed her own recent battle with the HOA concerning a flower bed she'd planted without approval. an altercation that had left her feeling defeated. Amid this newfound camaraderie, some residents started to organize a meeting to discuss potential reforms to HOA governance. They envisioned a community where members were treated as equals rather than subjects to rigid authority. The tide was turning. John's defiance had sparked a movement that fostered dialogue around accountability and transparency within their community governance. As John walked through Maple Grove, he could sense the change in atmosphere. Voices were louder, faces brighter with hope, and the community began embracing a collective identity that championed both individuality and unity against an overreaching authority. The fallout from John's defiant act unfolded rapidly, with the HOA responding swiftly to the public outcry. Within days, they issued a formal complaint against him, claiming that his sign violated community standards and could lead to potential fines. Tensions rose as John found himself facing the prospect of legal repercussions for simply expressing his frustrations. The HOA's pushback felt like an attempt to intimidate him into submission, but instead, it only strengthened his resolve. As news spread of both signs, the one on his house and the provocative display at the HOA office, community dynamics began to shift. Residents who once remained silent now felt empowered to voice their concerns. The informal meetings that sprang up in coffee shops transformed into organized town halls where neighbors passionately discussed the need for changes in HOA governance and accountability measures. Supporters rallied around John, some even offering to stand with him if it came to legal action. Conversations shifted from passive acceptance of HOA rules to active discussions about forming a homeowners association committee that would prioritize transparency and allow greater resident input. Meanwhile, the HOA struggled to maintain control over the narrative, issuing statements emphasizing their commitment to community standards while failing to acknowledge their role in prompting this unrest. As they attempted damage control, many community members perceived their response as further evidence of their authoritarian approach. In this climate of escalating tensions, John became a symbol of resistance, a figurehead standing against what many viewed as unnecessary bureaucracy. His actions had ignited a flame of activism within Maple Grove, sparking a movement that sought to redefine what it meant to be part of a community governed by shared values rather than rigid rules. Reflecting on the tumultuous events that unfolded in Maple Grove, John Richardson gained profound insights into the nature of homeownership and community rights. He had once viewed his home merely as a personal sanctuary, a space filled with cherished memories. However, the experience transformed his understanding of what it meant to own a home within a community governed by regulations and shared interests. John realized that homeownership came with responsibilities not only to maintain one's property but also to engage actively with neighbors. The HOA's attempt to exert control over seemingly trivial issues prompted him to consider how collective governance could sometimes infringe upon individual freedoms. He learned that while rules are necessary for maintaining a certain aesthetic or safety, they should never come at the expense of residents' voices or happiness. This ordeal illuminated the importance of community rights, an understanding that each homeowner should have a say in how their neighborhood is managed. John recognized that when residents remain passive, it opens the door for authoritarian practices masked as community standards. The solidarity he experienced during this struggle underscored the power of collective action. By uniting voices, individuals could challenge decisions made in isolation by those in authority. As conversations about potential reforms continued, John felt invigorated by the notion that they could forge a community driven by cooperation rather than compliance. While he had once seen conflict as something to avoid, he now appreciated that engaging in healthy debate and advocating for change was essential for a thriving community. Ultimately, this journey deepened his appreciation for both his home and the collective spirit that defined Maple Grove, reminding him that true community is built on shared values and mutual respect. In the end, John Richardson's confrontation with the HOA transcended a personal struggle. It became a catalyst for broader conversations about homeownership, individual rights, and community values. What started as an attack on his property developed into a significant movement within Maple Grove, igniting discussions about the very essence of what it means to live in a neighborhood governed by shared rules. The incident revealed the delicate balance between maintaining community standards and honoring the voices of its residents. John's defiance inspired others to reconsider their roles as homeowners, not merely as stakeholders in property value but as active participants in shaping their community's future. The dialogues that unfolded around kitchen tables and town halls emphasized the need for transparency and accountability from governing bodies like the HOA. Residents learned that collective action could serve as a powerful tool against overreach, empowering them to advocate for changes that honored both individual freedom and communal harmony. The once fractured neighborhood began to unite around shared values, fostering a sense of belonging that had been overshadowed by rigid regulations. As John walked through Maple Grove after these events, he felt an invigorated spirit among his neighbors. The laughter of children playing freely and the camaraderie among residents signified not just a return to normalcy but a commitment to protecting their rights together. This experience taught everyone involved that standing up for one's beliefs can lead to transformative change, paving the way for a more equitable and engaged community where every voice matters in collective decision-making. In this newfound unity, Maple Grove emerged not just as a place to live, but as a true community defined by mutual respect and shared aspirations.